Okay, welcome back to AndyTube in part 2 of the restoration of a Singer clamshell type foot controller or foot pedal. So if you watched any of my cleaning videos, that's all I did. Took this to the sink and sprayed this and all of the parts except the carbon resistor down with a solution of the crud cutter and water, and wiped it with a sponge a little bit and so forth, and blew it dry with the hair dryer. And if you don't have a crud cutter, I mean, you can use a mild dish soap. I've had people clean these with just like a paste of baking soda. So whatever you use to clean stuff like this, I do recommend it cleaning. So everything is clean. I want to look at polishing some of it, but I wanted to point out there was one little part left in here, and I said I usually don't take it out unless it's damaged or something. But then I did take it out in case you need to, or you find it missing, or parts of it missing or loose or out of adjustment. So this is the carbon contact adjusting. It's a little bracket, and it holds a little brass adjusting screw, and it sits down in there like that. And I remove the one screw that goes down into here to hold that end of it in place. So I wanted to point that out. And remember that part that just kind of fell out before? That is the other part of that. It's can be called a shorting strap or an adjusting carbon adjustment spring. And you see that one end has a hole in it, and the other you can still see a little wear on it, but it basically sits down in here. Oops. And that little hole is to slip over that adjusting screw like that. And then when the carbon sits in there, that shorting screw or a shorting spring or adjusting spring pushes up against this carbon resistor. Okay, so let's see if I can pull it out with the spring on there. So that's how that parts go together like that. Okay, so I did pull that out. So the main things that we usually want to take a close look at are the three springs. This is the actuating spring. The wear spot up here from the top of the clamshell, pushing on it like that, that's usually not a problem. You'll see a shiny spot there, and that's fine. Down here is where you usually have the problem, where it contacts the contact spring, this guy. And where those two meet, there can definitely be carbon deposits, and there can be pitting, and I've seen them with holes burned right through. You can see daylight right through this. And as I said before, these are in very nice shape. So I'm going to clean them and polish them a little bit, but they don't need to be repaired. And by repaired, I mean if this is very pitted, or this, usually sand it, clean it with a wire brush to make it all shiny. and tin it up with some solder. Heat the metal with the iron and put a little solder on there and rub it as smooth as I can, and then when it's cool, sand it or file it smooth to build up the pitted area. But we're not going to have to do that with this. And this bottom shorting spring also is in good condition. You see some marking here from the spring, so we're going to polish that up and see how bad that is. And I think it's just going to be a clean and polish, but we'll see. The other parts, you know, cleaned up well using the crud cutter. I might polish this up a little bit with the Dremel, and I might polish this and smooth it up a little bit. And I think on this first one here, I'll just use some metal polish to show you how easy that is to do on these parts if you don't have a Dremel. And I think I've got some fine 900 grit sandpaper here in the desk, and if I can find that, I'll show you how you can use that to polish up any worn areas. And then I'll be using the Dremel. So I give you an idea of the whole different methods you can use to clean these parts up. But I think I will start with the metal polish on this one, just to give you an idea. And you can polish this whole thing up if you want, but it's really not necessary. It's more the contact areas that you want to take a look at and clean up and stuff. Okay, so let me get the polish, things like that, and then we'll continue. Okay, and when I started the video, I didn't remind you to put your safety equipment back on, because I know that you do that. So, but just in case you didn't, it's a good time now. So here's my, I told you before, the Brasso that I use, and some Q-tips, and I'll just get a little going on here. And the idea is the carbon deposits, and cleaning them up can show you how bad, if any, pitting has been done. So let's see, maybe it's better like that so you can see. So I'm just going to do about 1 inch in this area, and I see some carbon deposits over here, so I think I'll put some metal polish on there too, get that working. And usually let the polish do most of the work. So while that's doing, I mentioned the fine sandpaper. So while that polish is there, I might cut a 3/4 inch wide piece of this off to do some of that. I'm going to start moving some of these parts back out of the way, especially the little guys, because I have a tendency to flick them off the table and they're hard to find. Okay, so if you do use a sandpaper, just lightly. And some people say sand in little circles. Some say back and forth. I say whatever you're comfortable with. You can see this is cleaning up pretty nice. see this little pitted area here. Well, the only thing I find about sandpaper is if there is any low spots, it doesn't tend to get the carbon out of there. It doesn't tend to do that so much. Let's see this guy. A little shorting spring here. I think this is why over the years I went out and bought a Dremel, and then I bought an extension cable and a hand unit for it, because it just makes stuff like this go so quick. But like I said, if you don't have a Dremel, and it's, you know, might not be worth for one sewing machine or whatever to invest in one, you can use some fine sandpaper or some metal polish. A sheet of sandpaper was a couple bucks at the Ace Hardware, and the polish was about $6. And the last one I bought I even found just at the Kroger grocery store in my neighborhood. So let's see if we can get that polish off of there now. So that cleaned it up pretty good. You just want a good contact. The smoother the contact that you make with these springs, contact spring and the actuating spring, the less arcing that you're going to have. And the smoother the power can flow, and the less arcing you'll have over time. See, that's a pretty rough spot right there. So I think that I showed you the metal polish there, I showed you the sandpaper. Let me get this wire brush out here and see if I can polish this up a little bit better with this. Now it's noisy, you know, that's the only thing about doing a video with it, so you can lower the volume or whatever. Okay, thanks for your patience with that. You can see how quick a Dremel or a Moto tool works. Now, you know, you can polish up all these screws and so forth. Oops, I forgot one of the springs. Let's go back and look at that. Let me touch this up here. Let me touch this up a little bit with the rotary. Okay, there's some very minor pitting on here, and I'm not worried about it at all. Like I said, these springs are in good shape, and I like the way that all the carbon has cleaned up nice. You see some discoloration and so forth around here, and I usually don't clean that up any more than I have already washed and dried it and so forth. I don't see any advantage to that. It doesn't help longevity or function. So if it doesn't bother you, you know, it's fine. If you want to go ahead and polish this whole thing up and polish all the little screws and so forth, you know, I do that on the visible parts of the machine and functional parts. But these I just do the contact areas to make sure that they're good. So that's going to be going like that. And this one will be under here. We got this. Okay. So I think we've cleaned as much as I'm going to. I think that I'll put some of this back together before we get into the carbon resistor. And I think the first thing we're going to do is put the adjuster back in there. I cleaned up the point on that, but you see in the back of that screw is a slot so that you can actually turn this and adjust it for how close or how far it's going to be. And some guys put a little drop of oil on there or spray it with WD-40. Some people don't because they say you don't want any oil on any of these springs. But I don't feel like this wants to turn very much, and it should. Oh, there it is. Okay, it's just a little tight. So I don't think I'm going to lube it or put any WD-40 or anything on there. It's just very tight, and that's good because there's no lock nut on it or anything. Before I mount this carbon adjusting, I want to show you that there is a brass nut embedded down here, and it can fall out during the, can you see it right there? Yeah. So be sure that that's in there before you put this on. You want to be sure that that is in place right there. So when you go to put this on, I drop the mounting screw in it like that, and then just kind of try and hold it up at the top and set it down in there. Okay. And then eventually the hole in that brass bracket is going to line up with the hole where the nut is here. But you can see that the adjusting screw kind of sits over part of the mounting screw. So you usually have to get that mounting screw kind of started at an angle with your smaller screwdriver, and once you get it in there and going, then you can take a bigger screwdriver and get it in there and get it tightened down. So you're going a metal screw into a plastic hole, so you want it firm, right? You want it all the way in, and you want to be sure that you've got this lined up with Which I gotta loosen that screw and move that hole's not quite lined up. There we go. So I'm gonna hold that lined up with the nut underneath while I tighten that mounting screw. There. That's better. That's lined up. Okay. Then we can get to the adjusting screw if needed. So that's kind of our first step of putting stuff back together. So, ta-da, progress, huh? I think we're going to want to put our assembly of the springs back in here. Okay, so I changed my mind a little bit about the progression and how I'm gonna do this, and I think I'll put the springs in from the bottom up. Usually I stack them together and just set them in there, but I think for the video here, it's going to be better to build it from the bottom up. So you remember down in here is one of the little brass nuts, and that goes for the contact screw where you screw the cord into, right? So you have that in there, and then on the bottom is going to go the shorting spring, and it's going to go with the tab and down. Tab end down. So it sits in there like so. And you can see this hole that lines up with where that little brass nut is, and this hole lines up where the big tall screw that holds the whole stack together goes, and then the end is on this little rest that sticks up right there. So tab down, we'll set it in there like so. The next thing that's going to go on top of that is the bottom contact spacer. And that's this guy with the flat part of the Lego looking thing lining up with those two holes in the brass spring there. And this is where the other brass nut goes for the contact screw where you screw the wire on. So if that came out, and it most likely did, be sure you put that little brass nut back in there. And then we're going to line those two pieces up. Yeah, see, this is why I usually do it as a stack, I think, because it doesn't wiggle around as much. Okay, and that's slanted on the top. Let's kind of just get it in there like that for now, I guess. And then the contact spring, and if yours is not in your foot controller isn't flat, if it's tilted one way or the other, you know, put it back in that way. If it's a universal one like this, it doesn't really matter because it's not arced or angled either way. And we're going to put that over the cutout over the hole in the top of that spacer. So I think you'll see how this is all going together. And then we're going to put the top contact spacer, the little shoe with the slant on the top. You see that there's a little nub that sticks out there that's going to line up here in that little slot between the two holes, and that's actually so that it can be adjusted a little bit if it needs to be. Okay, so we have that all painstakingly put back together. The last is going to be the actuating spring that goes on the top. Okay, and you remember here there's the 3 posts that match up with the 3 holes, so we can lay that in there and it should line up with, there we go, the hole in that top spacer. And that's where this long self-tapping screw was that we took out. The fastening screw and the little washer. Remember when we took that out? Right? So it's going to go right back in. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up before I put that weird little pressure washer connector thing down in here, because I don't want to lose my assembly here. Okay, so we'll tighten that up. Okay, got the screw in there. Let's go ahead and tighten that up. And then you remember those contact spacer. This, see how that can go move a little bit. The main thing is you don't want the, what I call the curl on the contact spring. There. The curl on that contact spring shouldn't be touching the actuating spring. There should be a space in there. If that's touching while you're not sewing, it's a problem like with the button one. You're just sending electricity through the carbons a little bit all the time. So you want to be sure when you tighten up the fastening screw and washer that that little shoe is kind of about in the middle of the adjustment area. And this is nice and flat on the 3 posts, and that there is a gap between the little curly Q of the contact spring and the actuating spring. Once you got it set like that, you can just go ahead and tighten it down. Okay, so here's how it kind of looks once we get it assembled. All right, we got the adjusting bracket and screw. There's a brass nut under there. We've got our little spring stack with the shorting spring, the bottom contact spacer, the contact spring in the middle, then the top spacer, and then the actuating spring on the top. Right? And it's all snugged up. What we want to do now is put on that kind of pressure washer clip thing. Where is that here? Remember that we had to pry that off with the screwdriver before. So the dome end goes up, and it goes on the middle post, right? The middle of those 3 posts. And when you find an easy way to do it, let us know, okay? Actually, what I usually try and do is take a piece of a pen or something that's hollow and about the same size round, and I moisten the end of it and put that washer there like that. Okay, and then I just try and get it down in there and get it over that center post and kind of push down and give it a little twist. And usually I get it on enough to keep the washer on, but you can see it's still pretty loose. So I'm going to put it on something I have, something hard, and I'm going to try and push straight down. Just kind of twist back and forth a little bit, but apply downward pressure to get that clip on all the way and snug up there. So that went pretty good, really. I think it's still a little bit loose compared to when I opened it up. So I'm going to try and put a little more pressure on that. I actually thought I pushed pretty hard before. Let's see how that looks. Yeah. So we've got all those springs back together. When we close the lid, and this post will push on that, and right there, which will make contact with the contact spring, a little round one in there, the curlicue. Start sewing, and eventually, if you push hard enough, it'll go down and short out to the bottom shorting spring. How about that? Alright, so I'm very happy with that reassembly. It seems like there was where's that little clip? Here it is, the other one I polished. The shorting strap or the adjusting. You can put that in now. It goes in, and the hole goes up against that adjustable screw for the carbon contact. Kind of sits in that little space like that. But I usually wait to do that till just before I'm going to put the carbon unit back in there, because it just has a tendency to, fall out. I don't know if you remember when I opened this up, and it came falling out. So somebody didn't get the carbon unit back in there properly, and so forth. So I think for right now, I'm just going to leave it at that, and then the next part, which I guess will be 3, is we're going to open this up and take a look at the carbons inside the resistance unit. Ta-da! So that'll be part 3. Once we take a look at that and see if we've got broken carbons or what's going on, we can reassemble it, get it back in there, and put my new cord on and all the little tie down pieces and fiddly parts, as Daffy Cat Bennett likes to say. Fiddly parts. So that's it so far. Comment, ask questions. I'm going to try and intersperse some of these pictures in there. Maybe I'll give you a close-up shot of it, you know. But that's it for part 2. I hope it's intriguing and interesting to you, and that you'll come back. Thanks for watching, and take care.